Hey everybody, Dan Holstein here, helping your business take flight. And I'm really delighted today to have two guests on our video today. We have Juliet Aurora and Steve Loates from AIS Solutions. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Dan. We got harmony going.
Absolutely. No singing, though.
Okay. No worries. We can edit some singing in or out, whatever you prefer. So AIS Solutions, tell us a little bit about, who you are, what you do, who you serve.
So AIS Solutions is located in Burlington, Ontario, and we are basically a bookkeeping and QuickBooks training firm. Our target clientele are small business owners who want accurate real-time financial statements and don't want to do it themselves or do it in-house.
Okay, so you make people's lives easier with all the bookkeeping stuff that they just love to do instead of getting out and doing what they need to do in their business.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is the entire purpose of what we want to do, is make sure that they're focusing on the reason they went into business for themselves in the first place.
Awesome.
And I think also the fact that we are a cloud bookkeeping firm has made it much more convenient for our clients, certainly in the last few weeks as we've all gone through these interesting times.
Let's go back to the beginning. You guys have been in business for about 20 years. So take us a little bit on your journey. I want people that watch this to understand, a typical or maybe atypical or interesting entrepreneurial journey that you guys have gone on and see some parallels with their own business journey. So how did it all start?
So I'll take this one since I was the one that started AIS Solutions, and we will be 20 years old in July, which is very exciting. And it's really easy to remember our number of years in business because it's tied to my daughter's birth. So I started AIS Solutions, and it wasn't called AIS back then, in 2000, because my daughter was spending too much time in daycare. I was recently divorced, single mom, and did not enjoy dropping her off at 7 o'clock in the morning, picking her up at 6 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And so when a series of events happened, everything, I guess the universe kind of aligned for me. The company that I was working for at the time was bought out by a big conglomerate. They were relocating to the US. Mm-hmm. And so I made the decision not to move and to venture out on my own so that I had some flexibility to spend time with my daughter. So I would work out of the spare bedroom of my house. And I would work in between nap times, and when she was sleeping, she'd go to bed, I'd go in the office to work. And so it gave me what I was looking for at the time. My main focus was to be able to put food on the table and make sure that my bills were paid. And so I gave myself 6 months and said, if I can do this, great. If not, then I'll go back, pound the pavement, and go back into the corporate world. So that was 20 years ago. Wow. Can't imagine, most people who enter their entrepreneurial journey say it was because, they have it in their family or it's something they've always wanted to do. And for me, it was just pure necessity. More than anything else is the reason we started.
Julia, it's really interesting. I think there's probably more business owners out there than that have had that similar situation where there's a certain quantity of factors come together to a point where it's a really important option to consider for them to go out on their own. And like you said, you had a really strong reason to be there for your daughter. So what were those early years like, working from the dining room table in between naps and everything else?
Honestly, it wasn't a business. Now that I look back, I had created a job for myself.
Which is a great start, though. That's a great basis to get moving on your own.
Yes, absolutely. And all I did was I took any client, any job, if it was related to numbers or in the accounting bookkeeping space, I said, sure, no problem, I can do it. So it was pretty much every client was completely different. Every service offering was different. And it ran that way, I'm going to say 5 years, until I moved to Burlington to be with Steve. And then started to shift the business a little bit more and started going on site to clients, and didn't feel like I wanted to do both sides of both the bookkeeping and the controllership side. So I brought subcontractors on.
Okay.
It was staff meetings around my dining table. So the business was still from my house, but it was all on site at clients' offices of business. So I had subcontractors doing the bookkeeping, and I was doing the oversight and the controllership. So fast forward, 2010, I am absolutely horrible at having work-life balance when the business is in my house. And Steve
Like
will be
many
able
people
to
are
attest.
experiencing right now.
Yes.
Yes.
So, I would get up in the morning and I would turn on my computer before I went to go make my cup of tea. And then, Sarah would go. Sarah's our daughter. She would go to bed, and I would go back up into the office and keep working. And so Steve very strongly, nicely, diplomatically suggested that we needed to move the business out of the house so that I had some separation. So in 2010, we moved the business out of the house and fundamentally took this as an opportunity to also shift the business model. So I was tired of going from client to client to client. We had plans of being able to grow and expand and hire employees instead of subcontractors, which didn't allow for what at the time was our biggest, I guess, USP, which was bookkeepers supervised by accountants.
Gotcha.
And so decided that we would bring everything under one roof. So all the bookkeepers were in one place, and then I could supervise them so that we could still maintain that USP. And so at the time, QuickBooks Online, cloud bookkeeping didn't exist in Canada.
Yeah.
And so we created our own cloud. Didn't call it cloud. Actually, we called it AIS Remote.
Right.
At the time. Spent a lot of time explaining to business owners what that meant, but basically invested in infrastructure and IT that gave us and created our own virtual server and secure networks that we hosted all of our clients' QuickBooks desktop databases, Sage desktop databases, did the bookkeeping from our office, and they could access it whenever they want.
So you guys were really early adopters in terms of the technology and seeing the benefit of the remote work, and I guess consistency for you and your team, and all cutting out the travel and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, and it really has given us an advantage as the entire industry has shifted to the cloud, because we worked out all those bugs back in 2010, and people are now working out the bugs of how to do it all remotely and how to get the data and how to get your clients online. So it certainly has given us an advantage.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned something that Steve gently suggested, and I'm going to put in brackets, in no uncertain terms, that you get an office.
Yes.
What was the identity shift like as the business owner for you guys, from working out of the home to working in a functional office space?
I can take this one, since the biggest shift was for me. I found that I was much more productive because I now had office hours that I had to get everything done. Whereas when I was working from home, I thought, oh, well, I've got pretty much, I could always do it after dinner. And one of the things that we had implemented was when I came home from the office, I stopped working. And so, so more than anything else, it was trying to figure out how to be as productive as possible with the time that I was at the office.
Yeah, it keeps you
so
focused.
It was a big shift for me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I also think, there was certainly a feeling as well of more pressure, right? Because we now had overhead, we had an office that we never had before. And so we had employees, not contractors. So there was certainly from starting the business that way, I think we both felt added pressure as soon as we moved out of the house. But we also felt the benefit of things life were a little better balanced, I guess, because when we were home, and when we were at work, we were at work. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good thing to have
that.
that.
I only had before, if I had a bad month, it wasn't a big deal. I didn't have any expenses that I had to cover. And now the recurring revenue was much more important.
Yeah, so two things there, right? You have that demarcation between home and work. Now, I know some people have an office, they still work at home, so that's a whole nother story. But the other part is you went from being a sole practitioner or having your own job. Now you've got a place of business, you've got actual staff. Now you had to start becoming that business owner. So what was that journey like, going from you're generally working on your own with some subs to being a business owner with space and all the additional overheads?
So Steve had been running his own business for quite some time before that. And so already had the experience of having employees. Although I had managed employees in the past, I was never ultimately responsible for their livelihood. And it was a lot of pressure. I felt it all the time that it wasn't just me that I had to look after now. It was, if this business folded, it's other people's families that are also being affected.
You're paying a lot of mortgages now.
Yes, absolutely. Not just mine. And with mine, if I had a bad month, Steve would cover the mortgage. It was fine. So it was a lot more, I felt it was a lot more pressure.
And how did you grow as a leader through that?
So I'm going to say that I didn't grow as a leader intentionally until after we started working with you as our coach in 2011. Before that, it was, I just kind of did what I always did. I didn't really think of myself as a leader. I was supervising the bookkeepers that were on my staff, but didn't really look at it as a business, didn't look at myself as being in a leadership position. So I didn't really view myself as a leader until a year and a half after we opened the office.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think fundamentally, one of the most important things we both learned from coaching was the difference between a job and a business. As Juliet said, I had my own business in a completely different area for a number of years, and reasonably successful, and I thought I had a good business. But what I realized was I really didn't have a business at all, because when I wasn't there, the business didn't function. So all I'd done is created a job, and when we started AIS together, we very much were doing the same thing. We hadn't created a business. We just created another job in a different location and created some jobs for some other people, but it still wasn't a business, but we weren't aware of that. Right. And it was, I think it was probably one of the most important things we learned in coaching is what a business is and how we needed to change if we actually wanted to have a business. And that was a very important lesson.
I think we talk about guys like Richard Branson, and I sometimes bait people with the question, how many businesses does he run? And people say, oh, hundreds. And the answer is kind of zero. He owns a lot of companies, and other people run them for him. And that's kind of having the business that works more and more without you is kind of what a business is all about, right? So you can have more income, more life, more freedom. So if we fast forward a little bit from those early days when you were working a lot of hours, working at home, working in the office with the team, if we just flash up to today for a second, what's business like now in terms of how would you define your business now? Is it closer to having the business that works without you than it was in the past?
Yes, we have a business now.
Okay.
That's the big difference, and absolutely, although it's not perfect, as I don't think any business is, it certainly is much closer to what we envisioned our business should be. And I think we also now know what we need to do to keep moving it forward towards the kind of business we want. So it's certainly very, very different than it was back then.
Well, and a good test for us was in 2019. We took a month off. Back in 2011, excuse me, there's no way we could have done that.
So hang on for a second. So when you say, just so for everyone can clearly understand what you mean by took a month off, what do you mean you took a month off? You took a month off and you stayed in touch with the office and checked in and popped in /
No, so Steve and I went to Europe for a month last year in May. It was unnerving. And I'm going to say we checked in twice.
Yeah.
I think we checked in twice.
Well, we checked in, I think, the first time to make sure we were still open and in business because we hadn't heard anything. So that's probably the first reason we checked in.
That's awesome. So if you think back to when you started, even just let's say back to 2010 when you first got your office, could you imagine that you would have done the work on yourselves and gotten the business structured? You can take a month off while everyone else operates the business for you.
Never.
No.
No.
And of course, it
No,
doesn't.
when we opened the business in 2011, Steve and I had not taken a vacation. And I guess we haven't really introduced Steve and I as the owners of AIS Solutions, but we're also husband and wife.
Right.
Which may give a different dynamic.
We are?
We are.
Oh, okay.
So in 2011, we had not taken a vacation in 2 or 3 years.
Longer than that. Longer.
2 or 3 years where we weren't disconnected. Okay. So we took, a week here, but our laptops and our phones and everything went with us. And so we were working even though we were working from a different place.
Yeah.
And so last year in 2019, it was literally, I probably did 45 minutes of work the whole month that we were away.
That's incredible. And that's a change of life, because if you have got your business structure where you can actually go away, you can rejuvenate and you can enjoy some of the fruits of all that labor. But that doesn't happen without, developing your leadership, and it doesn't happen without structuring a great team, a great system. So tell us a little bit about your journey of becoming that leader in terms of attracting the right people that you could rely on to look after the business for you. Because that's not always easy getting the right people on your team.
Go ahead.
And no, it's not easy getting the right people on your team. And we went through a revolving door early on and it's a funny story. So our one employee that we hired we went through, the typical interview process, resumes, interviewed a whole bunch of people, offered her a job. She started on the Monday and our office opened at 8:30. She went for lunch and she didn't come back.
Oh boy.
So that was was
it something you said?
Yeah.
No, but the great part was she then took us to the Employment Standards Board to get paid for the 4 hours that she worked for us as well.
Yeah.
So no, we had a revolving door for a while of employees coming in and out. And it wasn't until we made the mind shift of creating a culture where we realized how important the culture of the organization was, that everything started to change. That we weren't necessarily focusing on the skills of the people that we were hiring, but started focusing on who the people were that we were hiring. And that was a big change for us. And that probably took us 2 or 3 years to figure that out.
Well, one of my mentors, and you guys know him as well, Brad Sugars, he says that you get the people you deserve, right? So if your leadership isn't where it needs to be, you're going to attract people that are not going to be the best fit. So clearly you were able to attract some of those people by shifting that focus to working on yourselves, but also hiring based on your culture and personality and things like that. And of course they have to have the skill, but if they've got the right attitude, we know we can train skill. But if they've got, you can't train attitude, you got to find it, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
You cannot train nice.
True.
Yeah.
So as you started attracting better people that are a better fit for your team, how did the business start to evolve at that point, now that you had that team developing?
I guess more than anything, it was creating systems in our office that could be run, so that I'm a control freak and most entrepreneurs are control freaks, and want to have their finger on absolutely everything. And what we found was happening was that my control freakish nature wouldn't let anything out the door until I had looked at it.
Oh, that's
So,
your old,
which is
that's your
fine.
old sole proprietorness kicking back in there.
Absolutely. So, which was fine when we had one.
I think that's better known as a bottleneck.
Yes, I became the bottleneck. And so it was fine when there was one person or two people. When we got to 4 and 5, literally everything was late because of me.
Yeah.
Because they were done on time, but I didn't have time to review everything. And so it was realizing and being educated that I actually had to create a system for my team to follow so that I could be happy with the output and knowing that the standards that I wanted were being met, without me having to look at everything. Because I took it also personally and I said, it's my name on that door. So it needed to have a certain quality. And so that was a big shift for us.
Yeah, and that was also a time as well, I think, when, Juliet talked about things aligning for her, early when she started AIS Solutions. And I think they started to align again and I think it started with her frustration because she knew she was the bottleneck, and she knew she was, because of her perfect, wanting everything to be perfect for our clients. It was creating a problem for us. It was preventing us from growing. But also at the same time, I was becoming very frustrated with what I was doing. And so it just sort of led to, okay, well then maybe what we need to do is we will join as in the business together. I will focus on one area of it. You will focus on another area of it. And it will allow us to remove the bottleneck and continue to grow. And so it was, again, I think things aligned just at the right time for us to do that.
Yeah, kind of a case of 1 + 1 = 3 or more, right? So
Yes.
you went through a really interesting stage that I see a lot of business owners finding themselves stuck at, where you're really good at what you do, you have a good reputation, you start to grow, you hire some team, but you still have to have that rubber stamp to make sure that, whatever goes out the door meets your approval. And that could be a real stuck point. That's a bit of a glass ceiling for some business owners, because they get to a point where their team is less busy than they are. They're running around watching their team hanging out, having their whole lunch hour, laughing and joking. Then they get resentful. Why aren't they busy? And it's like, as busy as me, right? And you're the business owners, and they're just going like crazy. And then the excuse can kick in. Hey, I don't have time. When am I going to create a system? How am I going to train? I don't have time. I've got to get this stuff out the door. So it could be a bit of a self-perpetuating prophecy of just being stuck. So are you saying that, Steve, when you came on board, that was sort of the tipping point where you found the way to kind of put the brakes on for a bit and develop some of those systems to help the team meet Juliet's standards of quality output?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had already started doing it, but at that point in time, Juliet was doing really, all of the work in running the business. She did the marketing, she did the sales, but she also did the quality control check on the work, the training of the team, and developing the systems. So the developing the systems tended to be very near the bottom of the list when it came to what do I have time to do and what needs doing.
It's the urgent,
so
all
when
that
I
urgent
came
stuff,
on,
right?
Absolutely. And so when I came on board, my background was more marketing and sales. So I was able to take that part of the business away so she could focus more on the internal operations and training and be able to dedicate more time to it without the business suffering, and we could still continue to grow. So that's what we did.
That's fantastic. So having a partner to offload some of the important stuff that you don't have time for, that I think that's a critical step, whether that's someone that gets hired to do that or a partner like you guys. But as you mentioned earlier, the dynamic is that you guys are husband and wife. So tell us a little bit about like how the work and the husband and wife relationship kind of all collide. What's that like being in marital partnership and business partnership?
I can start it.
Okay, go for it.
I'm sure you'll
end. Julia will end it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that there are some critical things to make it work, and I mean I can honestly say it is not perfect, but it works, and it works most of the time, and it works because we are good at separating areas of responsibility. So as I mentioned, the sales and marketing is sort of my domain. But that doesn't mean we don't discuss things that relate to sales and marketing. We discuss all major decisions. But the final decision, if it is in sales and marketing, is mine. If it is, training or operations, we'll discuss it, but the final decision is always Juliet's as how we're going to do it. And I think the other key is that, we also happen to like each other, which I think is fairly important if you're going to work together and live together. But also and I think to me, the most important thing is respect. That I have 100% respect for her ability and her knowledge. And I like to believe she has the same for my ability and knowledge. And so that kind of respect, I think, helps to get you through those moments where the situation is perhaps not perfect. It's that respect and the separation of the responsibilities that can help you to work through it. So for us, I think that is how it's worked.
Wait, something that you touched on there, Steve, I'd just like to address. You mentioned that you guys collaborate on all decisions and all aspects of the business, but it comes down to whoever has bottom line responsibility for each aspect gets to make the final decision if one's needed. And so I think there's a high level of trust that's required to do that. But that trust comes out of that respect. I think if you guys didn't respect each other the way that you do, you wouldn't be able to have trust with each other to make those decisions. And that turns into resentment, which tears everything apart on both sides of the fence, right? So Juliet, what have you got to add around, the situation of being married to your business partner?
I guess with both Steve and I have very strong personalities. That I think if there was no segregation, there would be a lot of problems. We would always be stepping on each other's toes. And I think it was because we understood that we had strong personalities that we knew we had to segregate. I think also one of the challenges that we had early on when Steve came onto the business full time was that all of our life revolved around talking about the business.
Yeah.
Whether we were at the office, whether we were at home, we were always talking about the business. And it was actually our daughter who we were sitting around at the dining table and she kind of zoned out. And so we said to her, you're not participating in the conversation. She said, well, you guys always talk about business.
Ouch.
That the light bulb went on was, okay, we need to change that. And so started to shift it that, and again, we're not perfect. It doesn't happen all the time. But when we're at the office, we talk about business, and when we're not at the office, we don't. So that obviously if there's lots of stuff going on, then it does flow over, but we try to be really conscious of it, especially, dinner, business is off the table.
That's a good discipline to have. And I think for a lot of people watching this, that's, when they get home, they're talking to their partner, spouse, whatever it might be, whether they're in the business together or not. A business for an entrepreneur, it's a very big part of their life. And there's could be unresolved issues and things like that from the day that they need to express and bounce off their partner. But it's not always, dinner time isn't always best time or place to do that, right? So it's a bit of a discipline that you guys have had to implement there. But I think it's critical that someone has a sounding board, someone that they can talk to, whether that's, a partner, a peer group, whatever, association, coach, doesn't matter. Often the feedback I get from clients is, it's kind of lonely at the top. I'm glad I have someone to talk to. So it's awesome that you guys have each other to talk to, but you do have to be careful about the timing of it, not interfering with your family obligations. So you guys have, sorry, go ahead, Juliet.
And not only not interfering with our family obligations, we made a conscious, and again, it was because we realized we were doing it, is, Steve and I would go out for date night and we would go out for dinner and we talked about the business. Well, then that kind of defeats the whole purpose. So even though our daughter wasn't there, that you had to be conscious of, okay, we have to develop the business partnership, but we also have to make sure that we're still developing and spending time to enhance the life partnership.
Yeah, that there is more to the relationship than just the business.
Yeah.
Because I think when you are partners in life and in business, it would be very, very easy for your entire relationship just to become the business, which isn't healthy. And certainly is probably not the right path for long-term success. But it really is, as Juliet says, you have to consciously be aware of it and think about it and talk about it. If either of you feel like, we're digressing again, we're going back to that old pattern, you have to call the other one on it and say, hey, otherwise it's so easy to fall into that trap.
I think that's some great advice for the other, married business partners that'll be watching this. That's really good stuff. So you guys have learned a lot of lessons over the years. What would you say is maybe the most important lesson or takeaway that you've had from being in business?
I'll start.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I guess for me, So in 2017, we were very fortunate to be awarded an award. It was a global award. It was a huge deal in our industry.
Well, tell us about it.
Okay, so it's
You're
called
so modest, Juliet.
It's called the Firm of the Future, and it's put on by Intuit, which is the maker of QuickBooks, the one of the major small business accounting software programs. And it's basically, it's like a global contest that they do, and they you put in your name and you put in a bio and you put in an application, and they choose from 5 different countries a firm that represents the firm of the future, which is on the cutting edge and the leading the industry on the technology side. So we won in
using technology to help their clients.
Right. That's worded it better. Yes. So in 2017, we were stunned when we won Canada. Well, I was stunned. Steve said, "Of course we did," but I was stunned that we won Canada.
Well, it's like the Jim Rohn quote, right? Who else would they pick?
Right.
That's right.
But went on to end up winning it globally as well. So they narrow it down, and so we were picked out of 1,000 firms that applied, and it was an awesome honor. But I guess for me, one of the biggest things that came out of that was how many people came up to us and said, "You guys are so awesome. I can't even imagine my business ever being like that. You guys have it all together," is what we were told. And a reminder that nobody sees everybody goes through the same struggles, or people go through it at different speeds. Sometimes you go through a little bit more in one season than another, but everybody goes through the same stages as you build your business. And that we were thought of that, hey, we had it all together. And even then, even now, we don't have it all together. I don't think if your business is growing that you ever have it all together.
No. So
being able to accept that, and we actually wrote a book about it.
Move it over a little bit. Get it into the camera there. There we go.
We actually wrote a book about it because everyone kept saying that, I can't even imagine, my business looking like yours. And so we had to explain that here are all the things that went wrong, and maybe someone could learn from it. So that was the big one for me.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue for me. Thank you.
Perfect.
Well, I can remember someone saying to me a number of years ago, and we were talking about business and the challenges in business, and saying to me, the one thing you always have to remember in business is new levels, new devils. And it didn't really click with me at that time. But then I look back over the evolution and the growth of AIS Solutions. We started out 1 person, 3 people, 5 people, 10, 12, and so on. And I look back on it now and I see, there were new devils at each level. There were new problems and challenges we started experiencing when we had 10 people that we didn't have when there were 4 people. Yeah. And so we needed to learn new skills in order to keep the business moving forward. And so I think that was one of the biggest learnings for me. And, what Juliet said, it never is perfect and probably never will be. And that's the joy and the excitement of the entrepreneurial journey. And I think that's probably one reason it does take a special breed to be an entrepreneur. You've got to be a little bit crazy, but you've got to enjoy, continually experiencing new challenges and then having to grow and develop yourself in order to push past those challenges to keep your business moving forward. And so I think that's what keeps it always so interesting and exciting.
That's some great learnings, and something that you touched on, Juliet, people coming up to you after you won going, wow, if my business was just like yours. And Steve, you touched on this, they don't see the struggles. And what I see with a lot of business owners is everyone lies. It's like, how's it going? Busy or great. And meanwhile, it's not. So for everyone out there, it's okay to have your business to be a mess. It just can't stay a mess, but it's okay for it to go through messy timeframes. And you're not alone. Most people, when I was running my IT business, I thought the same thing. I'm the only one running to these silly challenges, but I found out that's not the case. So just to normalize it for anyone out there who thinks that their business is a hot mess and everyone else is perfect, ain't the case. So thank you for your honesty in sharing that. So what would you have, if you could wave a magic wand and go back to when you first started and a wizard appears, what would you want that wizard to tell you? What advice would you wish you had gotten at day one when you started your business that would have benefited you?
Okay, so for me, I think more than anything else, it would be to actually have a plan. So, for me, it was my business got built along the way. I had, it built because of certain circumstances. I wasn't intentional about what I wanted it to look like, whether it was 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. Whereas now I know what I want my life to look like in 10 years, that I'm now building my business to be able to support that life in 10 years. So I think it would be knowing that earlier, I'd probably a little bit ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
Okay. How about yourself, Steve?
And for me, I think it is probably, don't be afraid to ask for help. I was brought up to be independent, self-sufficient. You can do it yourself. You can accomplish anything you want. And I took that quite literally that, I can do this all on my own and, I don't need help. And yet when I look back at all of the people who have helped me, some I asked for help and, some they just offered the help. I really wish I would have known earlier or been able to in my personality earlier to ask for help, whether it is looking for a mentor, whether it's joining a mastermind group, whether it's working with a coach, whether it's just finding someone else in a similar business with similar challenges and just sitting down and having a coffee with them. But don't ever be afraid to ask for help, because generally you will also find people love to help. If you ask for it, people generally love to help you. So don't try to do it on your own. Nobody can. Ask for help.
Awesome. That's some great advice. Well, look, guys, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing your journey and the lumps and bumps along the way. I think it's going to be inspiring for other business owners that maybe are going through some of your challenges to know that it's normal. It happens to all kinds of business owners, and that you still can persevere, push through, and create a great business, regardless of where you're at right now. So thanks so much for sharing. And if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, maybe ask you a few questions about your journey, or maybe they need your bookkeeping services, what's the best way for them to connect?
We're both on LinkedIn, so that's always a great place to find us.
Yep. And our website, of course, AIS Solutions.ca. You can learn about us, learn about our business. And I guess the other thing that we have certainly changed in the last 6 to 12 months is we are now trying to specialize in certain areas of bookkeeping. So we are really trying to focus right now on a couple of primary areas. One is helping e-commerce businesses, and the other one is helping home service businesses. So plumbing, electrical contractors, landscapers, HVAC companies, renovation companies. And so those are the two areas where we're really trying to focus our business and help those business owners.
Okay, awesome. That's a whole nother video we can do on specialization. We'll save that one for next time, but good on you guys.
Absolutely.
Well, look, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to chatting again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank
Thanks
you,
so
Dan.
much.
All right, take care, guys.